In the night that seemed like so many others, in a small town forgotten by time, something unusual broke the usual silence. The wind blew cold, the houses were asleep, and only the distant hum of insects filled the air until a sequence of intense, silent lights crossed the sky, ripping through the routine with a disconcerting glow. For a small group of friends gathered on the porch, it wasn't just an uncommon spectacle, but an irresistible invitation to curiosity. Their eyes widened, conversations stopped, and a silent unease settled in. Instead of seeking shelter, the young people let themselves be guided by the mystery, deciding to venture into the forest that bordered the town. A haven of ancient stories, whispered legends, and secrets never revealed. If you're feeling the chills, subscribe for more scary stories. As they walked, nature seemed to transform around them. The sound of their own footsteps mixed with noises they had never heard. Metallic whistles, deep pulsations, cracks echoing through the trees, as if something or someone were lurking. The air grew thicker, charged with an almost palpable electricity. Strange signs began to appear. Watches stopped working, phones lost signal, compasses spun aimlessly. The further they went, the more apparent it became that they were not alone. Fear grew, but the desire to understand the unexplainable was even greater. Enjoyed the story? Hit like and share with someone who loves a good scare. It is in this atmosphere of growing tension that our narrative unfolds. What began as a simple summer night quickly transforms into an experience that challenges the very perception of reality, testing the limits between the possible and the impossible. Time seems to distort. Whispered voices emerge from nowhere, and every shadow becomes an imminent threat. The group soon realizes they are being watched, manipulated by an invisible presence whose intentions remain hidden. With each step, the unknown draws closer, and the sense of being at the mercy of incomprehensible forces intensifies. What really happened that night? What lies behind these manifestations that challenge logic and science? Could they be natural? Phenomena still not understood? Human-made technologies kept secret, or something even more extraordinary, an intelligence that surpasses everything we know? The emotional shock of contact, the terror of the unknown, and the desperate search for answers will intertwine, leading not only the characters, but also those who watch to question everything they know about the world. This story still has so much more. Subscribe so you don't miss out. This is an invitation to dive into a universe where mystery is the only certainty. With each passing minute, the tension increases, clues multiply, and the line between the real and the imaginary becomes ever thinner. Prepare to follow a journey of suspense and discoveries, where danger is not only in what can be seen, but mainly in what remains hidden. Because when the lights disappear and silence returns, only one question echoes in the dark. Are we really alone? However, to understand the strangeness of that phenomenon, it is essential to look beyond the present, revisiting the long trajectory of reports that extend centuries before that fateful night. From records in ancient scrolls to medieval chronicles, there are indications that lights and unknown objects had already intrigued humanity long before the modern era. Imagine, for example, the accounts recorded on Sumerian tablets describing celestial chariots crossing the skies, or the cave paintings found in the French caves of Lascaux, where humanoid figures and oval shapes mysteriously hover above hunters. It wasn't just superstition or a product of imagination. Many of these documents point to recurring patterns, almost as if humanity was periodically visited by inexplicable manifestations. Comment below what the scariest part has been so far. With the advent of maritime navigation, Spanish and Portuguese sailors of the 16th century began to report luminous globes floating above the waters, often accompanied by magnetic disturbances in their compasses. Notably, during Christopher Columbus' crossing of the Atlantic, He described a strange light dancing on the horizon just before sighting land. These episodes, recorded in ships' logs, defied explanations even for the most experienced navigators who had learned to distinguish natural phenomena from something truly out of the ordinary. Moving into the 20th century, sightings multiplied, with the increase of commercial and military flights. In 1942, during the so-called Battle of Los Angeles, sirens rang out across the city after radar detected unidentified objects flying over the California coast. Thousands witnessed beams of light and anti-aircraft fire at invisible targets, but no official explanation was ever found. Another turning point occurred in 1966, when dozens of students and teachers at Westall School in Australia witnessed a silver object landing and quickly taking off from a nearby field. The narrative repeated itself. Various witnesses, detailed reports, but no definitive resolution. Leave a like if you can't take your eyes off the screen. Over the decades, governments and military forces from different nations began systematically collecting and analyzing such occurrences. In Brazil, the Trindade Island case in 1958 gained international notoriety when it was photographed by Navy officers, showing a metallic object flying over the sea. Curiously, similar records come from completely different regions and eras, like the 1977 episode on Colares Island in Pará, where numerous locals reported light attacks that left physical marks and unusual symptoms. These manifestations, locally known as chupa chupa, sparked military operations and official investigations, the results of which remain largely unanswered. Shifting continents, the Soviet skies were also the scene of perplexing events. During the Cold War, fighter pilots reported chasing objects capable of performing maneuvers impossible for the technology of the time. In certain cases, there were reports of interference with onboard instruments and even brief blackouts in communication systems. Not surprisingly, many of these episodes were kept secret, fueling the sense that there is a global network of hidden information about the phenomenon. Want more stories like this? Subscribe now and prepare for the worst. When analyzing the consistency of these reports throughout history, it becomes evident that, regardless of technological advances, the essence of the mystery remains intact. The fear and fascination with the unknown continue to drive searches and investigations, whether in isolated medieval villages or in major urban centers of the contemporary world. Now think about how these narratives, so distinct in time and space, converge in surprising patterns: silent lights, objects of improbable motion, physical and psychological effects on the witnesses. This mosaic of occurrences suggests that there is something beyond folklore or conventional explanations, a presence that transcends time and geography. Therefore, when contemplating the events of that specific night, it is impossible to ignore the weight of centuries of mystery that rests upon each new sighting. Each report added to this vast archive of humanity deepens the enigma, inviting all to rethink what we really know about the universe and about ourselves, in the face of a story that invariably refuses to be closed. While popular narrative and oral tradition have kept the mystery of unidentified flying objects alive, the institutional response has always oscillated between overt skepticism and veiled interest. In this context, the involvement of governments and military agencies became one of the most complex and controversial facets of the phenomenon. Imagine, for example, how confidential documents and official investigations, often conducted in the shadows, acted as a filter to determine what would be made public and what would remain restricted to a few people. Not infrequently, this process fed conspiracy theories and an atmosphere of mistrust, further amplifying the doubts surrounding the phenomenon. If you're feeling creeped out, share this video with someone who loves a good scare. It is important to observe that, over the decades, specific programs have been created to analyze and catalog anomalous occurrences in the skies. A notable example was a project that, under the pretext of protecting national security, gathered thousands of reports, physical evidence, and radar recordings without ever offering definitive answers. What is perceived in this scenario is a recurring trend. After periods of intense interest, usually triggered by spikes in sightings, there is a retreat and closure of the files, as if the unknown bothered more than it threatened. However, from time to time, leaks and unexpected declassifications reignite collective curiosity, exposing details that were previously suppressed. Another layer worthy of analysis concerns how the official discourse is shaped according to political and social circumstances. In times of international tension, issues related to unidentified flying objects are treated as potential threats, justifying investments in monitoring technology and aerial surveillance. On the other hand, in times of stability, the narrative tends to minimize the relevance of the events, classifying them as misunderstandings, illusions, or misinterpreted atmospheric phenomena. This oscillation reveals not only the strategic nature of secrecy, but also the fear of causing panic or destabilizing society. Moreover, it is worth highlighting recent episodes in which military pilots and radar operators reported in public hearings encounters with objects that defied the known laws of physics. In these testimonies, which came to light due to pressure from civil groups and investigative journalists, intriguing details emerged. Instant accelerations, abrupt changes in direction, absence of thermal signatures. These characteristics suggest, at the very least, the presence of advanced technologies, whose origin and purpose remain undetermined. Now imagine what it would be like to handle information that defies the current scientific paradigm, and at the same time is treated as state secret, restricting access even for lawmakers and scientists. Comment below what you think will happen in the next chapter. Additionally, one cannot ignore the impact of new media and digital platforms, which facilitated the leak of videos captured by onboard cameras, infrared systems, and military satellites. These recordings, analyzed by independent specialists, often present flight patterns and behaviors incompatible with conventional aircraft. Consequently, the pressure for transparency increased, leading institutions to revise disclosure protocols and admit, in official statements, the existence of unexplained aerial phenomena still under investigation. However, the lack of concrete details and the ambiguous language only fueled further uncertainty. Finally, it is important to reflect on the behind-the-scenes of these secrecy policies. Accounts from former military personnel and high-ranking officials suggest the existence of parallel projects with considerable resources dedicated to studying recovered artifacts or attempting to replicate unknown materials. While none of this has been publicly confirmed, the mere possibility already stirs unease. To what extent does the quest for control of information serve to protect society? And when does it become a barrier that prevents progress in knowledge? When considering this institutional dimension, the mystery becomes denser, not only because of the phenomenon itself, but also because of the web of interests, power, and silence surrounding it. Don't miss out. Subscribe and hit the bell for more spine-chilling tales. As institutions maintain the veil of secrecy and speculation swirls in the background, there is a realm where the mystery manifests immediately and viscerally in the accounts of those who have faced the inexplicable firsthand. Unlike technical analyses and official investigations, the experience of direct testimony is marked by intense emotions, physical reactions, and a profound transformation in the perception of reality. The everyday dissolves in an instant, replaced by an avalanche of contradictory sensations, Fascination and terror, certainty and doubt, isolation and connection with something ineffable. It is in this whirlwind that the line between spectator and protagonist breaks, and the phenomenon ceases to be mere abstraction to become an indelible part of personal history. Now, imagine yourself walking down a deserted road when a light appears. Not like a distant lighthouse, but as a presence that seems to choose you. Time slows. The air becomes dense, almost solid, and familiar sounds acquire an unsettling strangeness. Many who have gone through this report sensations of paralysis, as if an invisible force suspended their will. In other cases, the mind oscillates between disbelief and the need to record every detail, as if the memory had to cling to fragments to avoid insanity. The impact is not limited to the moment. Sleepless nights, recurring dreams, and even profound changes in behavior are common after such episodes. Leave a like if you can't take your eyes off the screen. Beyond visual contact, some report even more invasive experiences, such as episodes of abduction or interaction with unknown entities. These accounts, as extraordinary as they may seem, follow surprising patterns. They often describe clinical environments, beings of unusual appearance, and procedures that defy conventional explanation. Time in these cases behaves erratically. Hours seem like minutes, minutes become eternities. It is interesting to note that, despite cultural and geographical differences, recurring elements emerge. Strange marks on the body, partial amnesia, sensations of displacement, or an inexplicable feeling of having received messages or instructions. On the other hand, the social response to these reports is often marked by skepticism, disbelief, or even ridicule. This creates a double barrier for those who have lived the phenomenon. First, the challenge of understanding their own trauma. Then, the fear of exposing their experience to judgment. Many prefer silence, while others seek support groups made up of people who have gone through similar situations. It is in these circles that a mutual understanding is built, where the report is not only heard, but validated as part of a collective experience that transcends traditional logic. Want more stories like this? Subscribe now and prepare for the worst. Considering these aspects, it is impossible to ignore the psychological and emotional dimension involved. Psychiatrists and psychologists who have delved into these cases point to symptoms that, in many ways, resemble post-traumatic stress, disorder, sensitivity to stimuli, inexplicable phobias, mood swings, and even changes in values and beliefs are frequent. Interestingly, there are also reports of positive transformations. People who, after the contact, develop an interest in scientific topics, spirituality, or environmental causes. The enigma, therefore, lies not only in the event itself, but in the deep reverberations it causes in the lives of the witnesses. Additionally, one must consider the role of the media and culture in shaping these reports. Movies, books, and news articles can both serve as inspiration and as tools of validation. However, fiction does not always capture the complexity of the real. There is a gap between the media spectacle and the anguishing silence that accompanies those who have truly faced the unknown. Have you ever wondered how it would feel to deal with the constant doubt about what really happened? For many, the search for answers becomes a solitary journey, marked by encounters with specialists, hypnotists, or independent researchers in search of plausible explanations. Do you dare to watch until the end? Subscribe to see what's next. Finally, one fascinating element emerges from these accounts: the feeling that something is watching, analyzing, and understanding the human being in a way that escapes our capacity for response. It is not just fear or awe, but a strange familiarity, as if we are facing something that has always been around us, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Contact thus becomes a kind of inverted mirror, reflecting not only the unknown, but also the limits of our understanding and the depth of our own inner enigmas. From a completely different perspective, the debate surrounding the phenomenon shifts to the territory of theories and speculations, where scientific imagination and philosophical creativity intertwine, trying to fill in the gaps left by the unknown. Instead of resorting to traditional narrative, several experts propose innovative interpretations for the mysterious events that unfold on sleepless nights and in isolated forests. One line of reasoning, originating from astrophysics, suggests that the observed manifestations could be remnants of interactions with forms of life based on biochemistry, radically different from earthly life, capable of operating in energy spectra invisible to human perception. This opens the door for the hypothesis that we are facing entities that not only defy gravity, but also traverse realities through pathways still not understood. At the same time, thinkers in the field of theoretical physics explore the possibility that advanced civilizations have mastered technologies for spatial manipulation, something akin to shortcuts in the fabric of space-time. If such abilities exist, objects could appear and disappear suddenly, defying the limitations imposed by Newtonian physics. Now imagine what it would be like to witness a phenomenon that seems to emerge from an absolute void, emitting neither heat nor sound, as if it were a reflection of something that coexists with us in another layer of reality. This perspective, however audacious it may seem, finds support in experiments with subatomic particles that demonstrate behaviors that defy classical logic. If you found this mystery intriguing, don't forget to comment and share. At the same time, there are those who, inspired by anthropology, propose a less literal and more symbolic approach. For these scholars, the reported encounters could be manifestations of universal archetypes, revealing not only possible visitors, but also profound aspects of the collective psyche. In this reading, the experiences would serve as catalysts for cultural and individual transformations, provoking subtle changes in the way entire communities interpret the world around them. Thus, contact would not necessarily be physical, but a kind of intersection between consciousness and mystery, where the human mind plays an active role in the construction of what is perceived. From yet another angle, neuroscientists have been investigating how certain altered states of consciousness, induced by natural electromagnetic fields or extremes of stress, can generate intense and convincing perceptions of presence or observation. These experiences, although deeply real for those who live them, could be the result of rare brain patterns capable of simulating encounters with external entities. However, such an explanation raises new questions. Why do so many reports share specific details, regardless of cultural background or geographical context? Could it be coincidence, or an indication of something larger operating beneath the surface of human experience? Don't miss out. Subscribe and hit the bell for more spine-chilling tales. No less intriguing, interdimensional theories are gaining traction among physicists and philosophers who question the linear nature of time and the rigidity of boundaries between parallel universes. In this perspective, the observed phenomena would be brief interactions between realities, moments when the veil separating different existences becomes thin, allowing fragments of a strange world to temporarily cross into ours. Now, reflect. How would we react if suddenly everyday logic were replaced by an order in which objects appear and disappear? Fundamental laws are subverted, and our very identity seems to dissolve in the face of the incomprehensible. In the face of this kaleidoscope of possibilities, the only constant is uncertainty. For some, it serves as fuel for scientific advancement. For others, it is an invitation to philosophical contemplation about the limits of perception and understanding. The phenomenon thus reveals itself not only as a challenge to rational explanation, but as a mirror of the aspirations, fears, and hopes of an entire civilization facing the vast unknown. Comment below what you think will happen in the next chapter. As the night progresses and the boundaries of explanation fade, there remains a fertile ground of uncertainty that challenges both skeptics and the curious. Now think about how, after the initial impact of an inexplicable encounter, the human mind tirelessly strives to make sense, even if that means confronting its own limitations. It is in this moment of suspension between what has already been experienced and what will never be fully explained that new questions arise like echoes in the silence of the forest. What exactly was witnessed? Was it an isolated manifestation or part of a broader pattern, still hidden from collective perception? Every fragment of evidence, every seemingly insignificant detail becomes a piece of an impossible puzzle whose edges expand with each attempt to solve it. Want more stories like this? Subscribe now and prepare for the worst. In contrast to the thirst for definitive explanations, emerges the recognition that not everything is within the reach of traditional analytical instruments. Confronted with the inexplicable, the human being reveals a remarkable capacity for adaptation and, at times, resignation. The daily lives of those who have lived extraordinary experiences are marked by a subtle unease, small changes in behavior, silent revisions of beliefs, and an involuntary openness to the unknown. This process does not occur uniformly. On the contrary, it varies according to cultural background, individual repertoire, and even historical context. In this way, the phenomenon ceases to be just an isolated event and becomes part of a collective narrative in constant transformation. If you're scared too, hit like and share with your friends. Another fundamental dimension, rarely explored, is the impact on interpersonal relationships. After a significant episode, old bonds may either strengthen or, on the contrary, break apart in the face of the weight of silence and doubt. Friendships are tested, families either fragment or reunite in a common search for answers. The absence of consensus, whether about the nature of what was seen or the meaning attributed to the experience, generates latent tension, shaping social dynamics in unexpected ways. Now reflect on how trust can be shaken when conflicting versions of reality collide, leaving invisible scars that persist long after the episode itself. Moreover, the search for meaning often leads to a deep re-evaluation of the individual's place in the universe. Many report a lasting sense of dislocation, as if they had been transported to a hidden layer of reality, accessible only to those who have crossed the threshold of the unknown. This awakening sensation can be as disturbing as it is liberating. For some, it triggers a renewed fascination with life's big questions. For others, it prompts a desire for isolation, a need to protect themselves from everything that reminds them of the original event. In this duality lies one of the most subtle yet profound marks of contact with the inexplicable. This story still has so much more. Subscribe so you don't miss out. On the other hand, a curious inversion arises. What was once a source of fear may, over time, turn into fascination or even pride. Encounters once considered shameful become shared in restricted circles where they are valued as transformative experiences. However, this re-signification does not eliminate the tension between the need for belonging and the risk of stigmatization. The individual oscillates between the desire to forget and the urgency to tell, between the impulse to normalize and the temptation to attribute a singular meaning to what was lived. Meanwhile, a new layer of questions arises. To what extent is the unknown really a threat? Are we facing something that truly challenges our survival or merely our understanding? The initial fear often gives way to restless curiosity, which drives amateur investigations, clandestine meetings, and even projects for collective documentation. Now imagine the effect of this movement on the small town in the countryside, where rumors quickly spread. The boundaries between reality and imagination blur, and every resident becomes, in their own way, the guardian of a shared secret. Don't miss out. Subscribe and hit the bell for more spine-chilling tales. Finally, there is a disquieting realization. The more one seeks to understand the phenomenon, the more it seems to slip away, reinventing itself with every attempt to capture it. The mystery, then, perpetuates itself not only through the absence of answers, but by the very dynamism of the unknown, which refuses to be reduced to static definitions. In this game of light and shadow, the only certainty that remains is the human impulse to move forward, even when all the paths seem to lead to the unfathomable. Throughout this journey, every step ventured into territories where reason is challenged, by enigmas that refuse to be fully revealed. The path traced resembles an ancient mosaic, where the pieces, sometimes fitting precisely, sometimes scattered in indecipherable patterns, compose an image that challenges direct contemplation. Between shadows and glimpses of clarity, understanding is built like a thread of light, winding through the dense fog, suggesting paths, but never fully delivering the entire picture. There are no ready answers in this shifting terrain, only a silent invitation to delve deeper, to confront what remains at the edge of certainty. Want more stories like this? Subscribe now and prepare for the worst. Perhaps as we approach this undefined horizon, the experience shares something with the feeling of walking through a maze of mirrors. With each turn, fleeting glimpses of new perspectives appear, multiplying possibilities and dissolving boundaries once thought to be insurmountable. The reflection of the unknown, instead of merely causing fear, provokes a creative unease, an almost instinctive drive to seek meaning where it hides, to decipher codes whose language we have yet to fully master. In this process, the known and the uncanny intertwine, weaving a tapestry of nuances that challenge linear logic and invite a more attentive, almost intuitive listening. If you're feeling the chills, subscribe for more scary stories. Notice then how the very nature of the mystery seems to feed on the convergence of perspectives, sensitivities, and distinct approaches. Instead of limiting itself to a single path of understanding, the phenomenon expands, absorbing elements of imagination, science, collective memory, and the intimate experiences of each individual. The result is a fertile field where seeds of doubt and wonder grow side by side, transforming the barren soil of easy explanations into a vibrant, pulsating ground of possibilities. Each fragment of a story, every hint of a pattern, each inexplicable sensation adds to the great enigma, creating a current of questions that, instead of distancing us, brings us closer to the heart of what we seek to understand. Leave a like if you can't take your eyes off the screen. It's curious to note how, in this journey, the expectation of an ending does not translate into apathy in the face of the absence of definitive answers, but rather into a creative tension that keeps the mind alert, the senses sharpened. What is at stake is not just the identification of causes, but the very experience of exploring limits, of living with what escapes control. Like travelers on a starless night, guided only by intuition and the fleeting glow of inexplicable flashes, we move forward through echoes of clues and eloquent silences, always waiting for the moment when a new meaning might emerge from the spaces between. Want more stories like this? Subscribe now and prepare for the worst. Reflecting on this journey so far, what emerges is less an accumulation of certainties and more an invitation to be enchanted by the unknown. It's as if each step taken redraws the path itself, altering the scenery as we delve deeper into it. It is not about a fixed destination, but a continuous process of rediscovery, where what seemed to be mere fear turns into fascination, and what was once doubt becomes the engine for new explorations. With each attempt to approach the mystery reveals new layers, inviting humility in the face of the vastness still unexplored. Comment below what the scariest part has been so far. Thus, as we approach the moment of final reflection, we are invited to realize that the true value of this search lies not in obtaining immediate answers, but in the experience of walking between questions, of allowing ourselves to be touched by awe and curiosity. Time seems suspended, as if the universe itself were silently waiting for the next step. And it is in this liminal space between fear and fascination that the last stretch of this journey is drawn. What remains, when the lights finally go out and silence returns to the interior of the night, is not just the enigma of the unknown, but a new type of unease, a subtle call that echoes within those who dared to face the inexplicable. It's no longer about seeking absolute certainties or definitive answers, but about accepting that there are mysteries that, instead of being solved, exist to transform us. Each encounter with the uncanny, each step into the realm of the invisible, reveals less about what we observe, and more about who we are in the face of what we do not understand. The unknown, in its essence, is a mirror. In it, we project our fears, our hopes, and the eternal human need for meaning. This story still has so much more. Subscribe so you don't miss out. By revisiting the journey of the friends that night, we understand that the true experience does not lie merely in the phenomenon itself, but in how it destabilizes and reorients all certainties. The impact is not limited to the moment of contact. It resonates silently in the days and nights that follow, shaping glances, gestures, and silences. The feeling of being watched, manipulated by forces beyond comprehension, forces each one to reinvent themselves in the face of awe. And somehow the community, once asleep in its routine, also awakens, becoming complicit in a shared mystery, even if it is never fully admitted aloud. Don't miss out. Subscribe and hit the bell for more spine-chilling tales. This coexistence with the inexplicable is not a burden, but a rare gift. The fear that initially paralyzes may be the same impulse that launches us in search of new horizons, of deeper questions, of a revived curiosity. The encounter with the extraordinary, as unsettling as it may be, has the power to realign priorities, dissolve prejudices, and open space for dialogue with what surpasses us. When the known is exhausted, what remains is the courage to walk in the dark, guided only by intuition and the desire to understand more, not necessarily the world out there, but the hidden layers of our own existence. Leave a like if you can't. Take your eyes off the screen. We are, after all, beings forged by doubt. Our history is woven through sleepless nights, through glances cast at the sky, and by that spark of unease that prevents us from accepting imposed limits. What we often call a threat may, in fact, be an invitation. The universe, in its silent vastness, suggests that there is still much to be discovered, and that part of that discovery depends on the willingness to face the abyss without guarantees, without maps, and without promises of return. Contact with the unknown is therefore a rite of passage, a reminder that growing is, above all, learning to walk on the thin line between fear and fascination. If you're feeling creeped out, share this video with someone who loves a good scare. When the doors of routine close and the night imposes itself, we are left with questions that do not silence. And perhaps this is the true gift of mystery, the possibility of recognizing in each fleeting silhouette not only the presence of something beyond, but the tireless flame of the human spirit, always willing to unveil, to feel, to transform. The phenomenon, whatever its origin, challenges us not only to look outward, but to dive deeply into ourselves, to perceive how much is still untouched, unsaid, unexplored. The true exercise begins now, to live with the mystery, to allow oneself to be affected by it, and above all, never to let awe fade in the face of the ordinary. Because in the end, it is this openness to the unknown that keeps us alive, alert, and above all, human. Don't miss out. Subscribe and hit the bell for more spine-chilling tales.